anti-NATO spots. One of the TV stations also organized nightly concert on one of the city's bridges, as hundreds of people gathered every night since the beginning of the bombing campaign in an attempt to prevent those bridges to be bombed. Now, if I can go back to what happened last night, the attack happened just about a few minutes after 3 a.m. in the morning, when I heard several powerful explosions which rattled the windows of my hotel room, which stands just a few meters across the street from this building. A few moments after the attack, I could see light in part of the building still on, suggesting that there may have been people still inside at the time of the explosion. Belgrade officials who rushed to the scene told Serbian television that as many as 15 people were working at the radio and television studios in the building, but there are no reports at this time of any casualties. The Serbian Prime Minister, Mirko Marjanović, condemned the attack, saying the building had no link to the military. Here is what he had to say a few moments after arriving on the scene.
Like all that's been done so far, this could only be done by criminals and fascists. We can say that this will not break us. We will rebuild all of it once it is time.
Michael, NATO also hit for the fourth time a factory in Valjevo, which is a city 50 miles south of Belgrade. Serbian television showed these pictures of these powerful explosions, as you can see, one after the other. This factory...
Pre-strike image of military facilities at Pristina Airfield. While the next slide is a post-attack image. Finally, we have an original image of the Euroslovak Army garrison, home of the 243rd Mechanized Brigade, a unit actively involved in action against the UCK and Kosovar Albanian population. The next image is the cumulative result of our airstrikes against the same facility. We have one video of an attack against an underground oil storage facility in the vicinity of Novi Sad.
Moments ago, they'll be taking 96 Kosovar Albanian refugees to Pishtoki, which is a town in southwestern Albania. Now, these people are unable to make the very long and difficult road journey down to that area. The roads in Albania are far from ideal. Some of these people are in very bad condition. They will be accompanied by their...
The Apaches are in Brindisi. We've just been briefed by the Army, and this is the first briefing that we've had over the past 4 or 5 days. They tell us that a landing strip that was being prepared for the Apaches was not quite ready yet, which explains why the Apaches are not here. We were first expecting them on Sunday. Sonia?
Very part of the air campaign by going very low, going into Kosovo, attacking surface-to-air missiles, attacking anti-aircraft artillery, clearing the way for then aircraft such as the Harriers and the A-10 tank busters and the F-16s. They can then provide excellent aerial artillery for things like helic-borne troops. So they are a very, very useful weapon. The embarrassment is their deployment was announced 2 weeks ago. The first ones have probably only just arrived in Albania, and there is a certain amount of egg on face in the US Army. It's taken so long.
The helicopters have left Brindisi, Italy. It's a short hop, and we're expecting them any moment. Now, just behind me, we can see some activity. Troops have been clearing this runway. We've been told they'll be landing very close to us. And just a little distance away, the whole eyes of the world, we have journalists from China, from Korea, from even as far away as Australia, everyone waiting here for the Apaches to arrive. Now, of course, the Apache mission, dubbed Task Force Hawk, is to go into Kosovo and try to attack Serbian targets such as tanks and even troops. The Apache, specially equipped for this low-flying mission, it has 16 Hellfire missiles, it has the capability to fire rockets, and it can also fire a 30-millimeter cannon. We talked to some pilots today, and they say the Apache will be flying both night and day. It has very sophisticated avionics. The still no sign of them, but we've been told the Apaches will be accompanied by other support helicopters. We should see some Chinooks, which are large carriers, large transport as well as goods carriers. We should also see some supporting Black Hawks. But the latest from here is, at the moment, is it's still wait and watch for the Apaches.
A total of 24, which have been accompanied by several Black Hawk and Chinook helicopters. Bad weather delayed the Apaches' deployment for several days. A spokesman for the US European Command in Germany has said the helicopters have yet to be officially turned over to NATO command. The low-flying Apache is designed to attack large concentrations of tanks, armored vehicles and ground troops. They set off from Pisa, Italy this morning, refueling on the way. There they arrive in Tirana in Albania. See the landing there in Tirana in Albania. The Apache helicopters are landing there. Considered to be a very powerful ground force aid, being able to attack large concentrations of tanks, armored vehicles and tanks. Lots of international media there have been waiting for the arrival. You can see them in the foreground of the picture, waiting for the arrival of those helicopters from Italy. The arrival of these Apache helicopters, they were delayed for a few days due to conditions there in the Balkans. You can see some of the support helicopters that flew in with the first wave of Apaches, the Black Hawk and Chinook helicopters accompanying the Apaches. As you can see now are Chinooks. They're basically troop carriers.
Give me the count again. Level check. I have IFB. I have. Yeah.
Today, having failed to protect the hundreds of thousands of people driven out of Kosovo, the first refugee airlift at last got underway, nearly a month after the crisis began. The people here would have liked these troops to be assigned a more aggressive role, but the officer commanding stressed this was a humanitarian operation. It was vitally said to move the refugees from the border.
Clearly, we don't want them in range of artillery fire. There's been the harassment, and clearly, they could become a target. Also up here, the conditions are not good. It's been raining almost continuously. It's pretty cold at times, whereas down on the coast, it is much warmer. We've got much better sites to put them into, and much, shelter in place straight away.
By on the runway, we talked to the Army about their mission, about when they'll be going into Kosovo. The Army will not provide any operational details, obviously for security reasons. All they say is their mission is going to be dangerous because they're going to be flying extremely low.
And here, arriving in the Italian sky, under escort by more than a dozen other helicopters. Why have they been so delayed? Well, Pentagon officials blamed rain, mud and overcrowding at Tirana for the delay in their arrival.
Here they are, they're flying over Rhinus Airport, Tirana's main airport there, which is the gathering ground for most of the troops within NATO, the build-up of troops now. And the, as you can see here they are, the Apache, it's AH-64, known as the helicopter gunship, very effective at killing tanks as they proved during the Gulf War 8 years ago. But some people fear that they might have a tougher time against ground fire and anti-aircraft fire from the Yugoslav forces, but they certainly will change the nature of the air war as they're ground-hugging, contour-hugging helicopters.
Although they've arrived, it will take some time for them to actually get into the theatre of war. They'll be ready, in fact, to go on the attack after about a week or so from their deployment. They're going to Albania. As Jeremy was saying, they're going to increase NATO's ability to smash Serb forces, or at least that's what NATO would have us believe. They've going to be taken into Albania, as I said, within about a week or so, and some 24 in all will be deployed. The first 6 there.
Beasts of burden, really.
Very much so. They're not combat helicopters, but they can carry 10 or 12,000 pounds of stores. If you want to overload them, as British forces do the whole time, can carry up to 90 fully equipped men. They would be...
It's called Task Force Hawk. Its job is to hunt down and destroy the Serbian tanks and troops which have proved so elusive to Allied attack in Kosovo. These are the first of 24 Apache tank busters which will be based at Tirana Airport, backed up by Black Hawk helicopters and Chinook supply choppers. Just 100 miles from the border, from here they can strike swiftly anywhere in Kosovo, reacting quicker than the NATO jets based in Italy, and, commanders hope, catching Serb forces before they have time to take cover. The Apaches are seen as a vital precursor to deploying Allied ground troops.
Alliance warplanes are starting their second month of bombing a European nation. When Mr. Blair meets President Clinton shortly, the stakes could hardly be higher. Robert Moore, ITN.
War is escalating, and tonight, proof of it. The world's most lethal helicopters flying into Albania, and with them a new ability to strike, not at 15,000 feet, but at 50. Anywhere in Kosovo. The Apache helicopters are nicknamed tank busters. They can fly at night at 180 miles an hour and lock onto a target 3 miles away. The arrival of these helicopters heralds a new phase in this war, a campaign that will be waged not on the ground but just above it, as the helicopters fly low, deep into Kosovo to attack Serb tanks and artillery, closer in than NATO has dared to go thus far. But flying so low will make them highly vulnerable to Serb attack. With these new weapons come 2,500 troops. There'll be 8,000 ready soon. They're not here simply to feed refugees. Albania is now being transformed into a vast and lethal military base.
Helicopter. Designed to destroy tanks and break up massed troops, and can operate in almost any weather.
Albanian capital Tirana to bolster the NATO campaign against Serb forces in Kosovo. Jeremy Cook saw the Apaches arrive.
Across the Albanian mountains, bringing NATO firepower into Belgrade's backyard. The Apaches are state-of-the-art killing machines designed to rain awesome firepower on enemy troops, artillery and armor. Soon they'll be on the attack against Serb ground forces in Kosovo. Their cannons fire 6 rounds a second and they can carry 16 anti-tank missiles. In contrast to NATO's combat jets, the Apache's method of attack is said to be low and slow, giving more time over their targets and more chance to destroy the enemy. But it also means a higher risk of being shot down. Despite that, the pilots say they're ready to go.
Morale is exceptionally high. I won't speculate on the political message. Obviously, we're here to do a mission. Our mission is to engage and destroy ground forces. You can speculate from there what we might be doing.
Apaches don't travel alone. The first 6 to arrive in Albania were escorted by as many Black Hawk helicopters, including those carrying the search and rescue teams that will go into Kosovo if an Apache is downed. Eventually there will be 24 Apaches flying combat missions from Albania, but they come with more than 2,000 support personnel. The military backup includes infantry, artillery and surface-to-air missiles.
Two RAF pilots prepare for another attack over Serbia or Kosovo. Their pre-strike briefing starts with the weather conditions, often the deciding factor over the success or otherwise of the mission.
The cloud back at base is quite good, at least. We've got a decent day here, very little chance of a shower.
Then, using the latest military intelligence, they plot the danger areas where the Serbs could attack from the ground.
What we're looking for in this form of close air support is any armour or military activity on the ground that's clear of any collateral damage areas, which will then be, under our rules of engagement, authorised to attack.
Despite flying day and night, the mood is said to be upbeat.
Everything is going really well at the moment. Morale is high with the engineers and the pilots, and the aircraft serviceability is magnificent.
After the briefing, the pilots make a final check around their aircraft, making sure that everything is correctly in place. During the month-long campaign, the RAF's #1 Fighter Squadron has flown 250 missions against various targets. The RAF Harriers have been responsible for about 10% of the 2,500 NATO attack missions, and so far there's no sign of fatigue amongst the pilots. The extent and sophistication of the NATO campaign means they're not flying into the unknown, but they are well aware of the real dangers waiting for them only a short flight away. David Crabtree, Sky News, Southern Italy.
What are they
nice target there, isn't it? I mean, that's a vehicle shed, vehicle storage shed. There may not be vehicles in there, but what they want to make sure is that the VJ have got nowhere to go home to. And looking by the sort of explosion, there's not a lot of vehicle secondary explosion that came out of that. And they've actually went through, this is in the 3rd Army area, which is really in the niche area, F-16s, laser-guided bombs, probably the smaller GBU-12s, the 500-pound bombs. There you can see to the top of the picture where the pointer went to, that was the first target we saw. This is the third, or the second target, the third building. Again, doesn't look to me as if there's much in it, but then the point is you sort of, they're out away from home at the moment, let's destroy all of the buildings. And this is in
so
fact
they've got no fallback
yeah.
position. There's nowhere where they would normally go back and repair the vehicles and
no maintenance facilities,
right.
and no home. In a way, I mean, they're going to be out on the road now, and that makes them far more vulnerable than they were before.
And I was also reading just a short time ago about this Pentagon briefing. They were also talking about having inflicted serious damage to major routes in and out of Kosovo from Serbia.
Now, this all adds credence to the idea of ground forces. I think anyone who believes that there would be an invasion of Yugoslavia as a whole is mistaken. But to go into Kosovo, if the plan is to isolate Kosovo, there are 14 roads in, 2 rail links. They seem to have blocked 10 of those roads. They went back last night and they hit a railway bridge where the railway had already been disrupted. They've now taken down the bridge, so it would be almost impossible for them to rebuild it.
And then on top of that, things like the oil refineries
yes.
like here. So they're degrading and reducing
the reinforcement capability,
yeah,
I think, which is important, and they're isolating the forces which are in Kosovo. That will make it easier for the Apaches to go in and to deal with them, the multi-launch rocket systems to deal with them, and eventually, who knows, maybe the tanks of the 4th Armoured Brigade, the British Army.
More refineries. So,
and these are the stealth fighters.
Talking about 100% of the country's oil refinery capability destroyed, I thought I heard from that Pentagon briefing. And, did I hear that right? And about a quarter of the total fuel storage areas. I mean, it's a significant target anyway.
It is, and the problem they've got now, of course, is resupplying the oil. Oil is coming in through Montenegro. There's no embargo against it coming into the port of Bar and then being shipped up. So they've started to break the links between Montenegro and Serbia for that reason, and they actually don't know that's interesting. If we look at that just for a second, to break off there, the SA-6 training facility, and this is where the missile systems are being trained. If you look at this is a very spectacular explosion there. There obviously was something else other than just a training computer in there. They're just taking away the home base, and that's going to demoralise the VJ. Nothing an army wants to lose more. And here, a 500-pound bomb, a GBU-12, against one fuel truck. I mean, it's degrade the fuel capability wherever they can. That's just one tanker, 40,000 gallons probably. But in terms of flying capability, there's enough there for a squadron of aircraft to take off. So again, keeping the aircraft on the ground. And, you know, all it's looking at vehicle storage facilities. Niche, of course, the headquarters of the 3rd Army. They desperately want to destroy that capability. So I see it it being isolate the army, give them nowhere to go home to, and then start to degrade them inside Kosovo.
To a forced entry into Kosovo for NATO will be air mobility, the mass use of the helicopters now being mobilized in northern Albania. The alliance's main axis of attack is likely to come across its mountainous border with Kosovo. Heli-borne troops could seize key points ahead of an advance of ground forces using the road from Kukës to the plains around Jakavica. Paratroops too could play a key role with major drops to fragment and split resistance by the Yugoslav army. And it's from Macedonia that NATO could launch its main armoured thrusts using the main road from Skopje to Pristina. Special forces and heli-borne troops would again be needed to secure key points ahead of the advance, such as bridges and viaducts. It would take only 75,000 NATO troops to do the job, according to defence analysts, and such a force could be assembled within 1 month. The Serbians by then may well be demoralised.
If you're talking about a force that potentially, by the time a non-permissive entry goes in, will have been very short of food for 3 weeks, very short of fuel, if not out of fuel, and will have been under constant attack for very nearly a month, something tells me a lot of the conscripts will perhaps forget about the historical myths and think a little more about whether they'll get back to Belgrade and Novi Sad.
If the orders were given today, the UK could scramble reinforcements of up to 5,000 troops within 4 weeks to the battle zone. A composite brigade made up of paras, commandos and Gurkhas, like the one that saw action in the Falklands War, backed up by artillery, engineers and logistic regiments. But the commitment of ground forces could mean NATO troops will be in Kosovo to stay. Some say at least for a decade.
At the air bases beside the Adriatic, war is developing its own routine. Here at Aviano in Italy, the pilots from the 510th Fighter Squadron have flown missions every day of this campaign. Some are frequently in the air for 7 hours a night.
Airborne. Farmer, since you've got the demob.
This week, these flyers will be joined by reinforcements.
To the cap right away.
Even whilst missions are being flown in the face of missiles and ground fire, an intense debate has broken out about the whole Kosovan strategy and the reliance on air power.
The elimination of ground forces as a possibility is both a strategic as well as operational advantage to President Milosevic.
Sign a deal, but Milosevic was building up his forces. Washington found it hard to read his intentions. Some argued that the talks in Rambouillet were being used by Milosevic as a cover to prepare a military campaign. Ominously, as it turned out, officials were collecting identity documents from villages in central and western Kosovo. The operation began with the intention of weakening Milosevic's military structure and forcing him to negotiate. The prevailing political view was that a brief campaign should prove enough. NATO's commanding officer insists that the decision to exclude ground forces was not a military one.
Was it a mistake before this campaign started to rule out the use of ground forces?
Well, as I said, we had a certain mission to do, and we were after diplomacy, and we had looked at a number of options over the summer, and this is the option that the NATO governments chose to select.
Operation Allied Force was planned as a campaign of gradual escalation. Initially, the attacks were limited to Belgrade's air defense system. Some payloads were reduced to limit surrounding damage. It took over 10 days before the level of attacks reached that achieved in the first night of the Gulf War. When defense buildings were hit, they had already been evacuated. One American politician described the campaign as bombing light. To others, NATO was fighting a gesture war. There was only one alternative: to increase the bombing and widen the list of targets. For the first time, a barrage of cruise missiles hit the heart of a major European city. Will weaken, but they do not have the means to bring it to an end sooner without using ground troops or risking the lives of the pilots by going after the Serb forces on the ground.
Unless there is a political crack in the Belgrade regime, and I can't see that at the moment, there is going to be a long campaign of air to continue until we can reduce the risks of putting ground troops in. And there will be casualties.
The crucial political relationship behind Operation Allied Force is that between Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. Neither leader can contemplate failure. Both men have invested political capital in the success of the Kosovan campaign. Washington and London continue to resist calls for sending in ground troops, except as part of a settlement. The politicians have been told there would be significant casualties. This will be a bayonet, knife and bullet war, said one advisor to the White House. Even so, in recent days, the American administration has been giving itself some room to maneuver. Aircraft are being deployed in southern Europe. This was not what the planners in